Are you literally able to just pick the phone up, or your agent pick the phone up and call whoever you want in this situation and put yourself out there?
I think everyone's in a slightly different situation. And to be completely honest and transparent, I think the options Marcus Rashford had will probably be different to the ones I had in 2011, with all due respect to myself.
Man United fly to Stockholm for their first pre-season match this weekend, but 5 big names weren't allowed on the plane.
Rashford, Garnacho, Sancho, Antony and Malacia were told not to show up to pre-season because they aren't part of the club's plans, but United are struggling to sell them.
And time is running out. The club desperately needs that money to invest in new players, and for the players themselves, their bargaining power is getting smaller by the day.
So what's it like to be a player in limbo, and why can't United shift these players? But could it all come good for Rashford in the end, though, and he joined Barcelona, or is that just a pipe dream?
Welcome to the Sports Agents. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Gabby. Are you in Zurich?
I am. Can you not tell by the beautiful backdrop?
You've really gone to town on that grey wall behind you.
I'm in my hotel room here, and I'm an hour ahead of you, obviously. So it's still a good 9 or 10 hours until kickoff here in Zurich. And it's a long day, isn't it? I was thinking that this morning when my alarm went off at 7. I think it's a long day if you're a player and you're not kicking off till 9 o'clock at night. I was with Farrah Williams the other day saying she used to hate those late kickoffs because obviously you don't know what to do with yourself.
Well, they can't really do anything, can they? They go for a walk and that's about it. But aside from that, they can't really do a great deal because it's all about rest and mental preparation and so on and so forth. So they're just lying there bored out of their skull.
Ellen White said the problem as well was fueling, which is not something we have a problem with. But she said, when you take on board your food and having to eat an extra meal, anyway, that won't be my problem today. I'm very much looking forward to this evening. And I really enjoyed, actually, last night's first quarter-final between Norway and Italy making it through to the last four for the first time in 28 years. A last-minute, a 90th-minute winner from Christina Girelli, who was, perfect timing. I was watching it in my hotel room, imagining my colleagues who were doing the game back in Salford being delighted with that. It wasn't going to extra time and penalties. And obviously we'll be hoping for some kind of drama like that tonight. But Sweden are not going to be an easy prospect.
No.
England.
No. They've drawn twice with them in qualifying, haven't they, as well? I know they beat them in the semi-finals last time round, but they've topped their group.
Yeah, and their record stretching back against Sweden is not great. They've only won 4 times in 25 actually, and they are a team that are united. They're a kind of a team that've been together through 5 or 6 major tournaments, and it feels like it's the end of the road for this evolution of this Swedish team. But this obviously is bad timing because this podcast will probably go out a few hours before that game. But the other big news in the world of women's football, Olivia Smith's signature is finally on that. Much talked about, wasn't really a secret, was it, that Arsenal were in for her, the first £1 million female footballer she signed from Liverpool. This feels like a big milestone.
It does. There was rumours that Chelsea might have got in for her as well. They had the previous record with a $1 million signing when they signed Naomi Girma, but it feels like those two are stretching ahead of everybody else, doesn't it now?
Yeah, City and United haven't gone beyond £300,000 in terms of transfers. I guess historically, before the WSL became the biggest league in the world in terms of the values of players and the values of clubs, we now know, 200 million value on Chelsea as a club. I guess a lot of the talent that was coming through was homegrown, and there was a lot of, development of British players. Now, of course, players from all around the world are coming in, and those values are just going to get pushed up more. And Arsenal have always been the leader, haven't they? They've always set the benchmark, whether it's for attendances, playing in the men's grounds, which they're going to do next year. They're going to play every game at the Emirates, they hope, to their home games.
So much other great sport to look forward to over the course of the next few days. You've got Usyk Dubois on Saturday, and that will be the focus of our special weekend edition. There's the Lions Test, the first Lions Test against Australia at the weekend as well. The Open runs Thursday to Sunday at Portrush, which I'll be heading off to once we've recorded this podcast, which I cannot wait. I was there in 2019 when Shane Lowry won it, when all the hype was around Rory McIlroy beforehand, and then he hit his first shot on the first tee out of bounds. I can remember standing 200 yards up the fairway thinking, oh my God. I mean, you just couldn't write it back then. It is a stunning course. The atmosphere is phenomenal. The crowds there are going to be something like 280,000, I think. Only St Andrews gets bigger crowds for the Open. It will be a really, really special 4 days, and quite a. Scottie Scheffler is always the favourite, and Rory McIlroy is always second favourite. But it's kind of, without having to use a pun, it is wide open. It is wide open. There are lots of people who I keep hearing being tipped and mentioned and fancied, and that goes from people who are maybe 20 to 1 in the betting to people down at 275 to 1.
You mentioned
because links golf suits them,
Yeah.
or they're in good form, and
So basically, you're not going to predict anything. So if you've come to this podcast hoping you'd find out some insight, where the championship's going, you're not going to get any. Right.
Do you want me to tell you who I've put my money at? So I've gone Fleetwood, I've gone Hatton, partly for just favouritism and English favouritism and so on and so forth. But Tristan Lawrence, who had a very good Open last year and is in very good form as well. Ryan Fox, who is a big hitter, and the BBC's golf correspondent Ian Carter told me to have a look at Ryan Fox, the New Zealander. And then I've also gone with Daniel Brown, who had a very good Open last year. But also, I was looking at the Sky preview, and several of the Sky team had him as a dark horse. Okay. So he's at 275 to 1 when I had a look. So I've laid it out there before we're underway. They're the 5.
Okay, good, and we can go back and review that next week. On Scottie Scheffler, I was surprised how open he was.
Brilliant.
Come out and said, and I think people in a lot of other sports, people in different sports, will probably feel the same way. This is not a fulfilling life, he said, being a professional golfer. And this is a man who's done it all and won it. He's won 3 majors. He's won Olympic gold. Of all the people that you would think would say it's not a fulfilling life, you'd expect it to be somebody who's an also-ran, the fodder, who just turn up week by week and never win.
Yeah, and he said he wins a tournament, and he's thinking, first of all, why do I want to win this tournament? But then I've wanted all my life to win this tournament. I've worked so hard to win this tournament. This is what I practice for. I win the tournament, and the euphoria lasts for a few minutes, and then it's, okay, what are we having for dinner? And I thought that was, we talked to so many sportsmen and women who have won something and then they're immediately on to the next thing. It can happen in football. I don't know, you win a trophy, but it's halfway through a season, right? We've got to be back into work and so on and so forth. You've got to, that's what I often say to them, surely you're going to enjoy it. Surely you're going to give yourselves 3 or 4 days off and enjoy it. The golfers can't lots of the time because they're onto the next tournament. But it was it's really caught the imagination as that press conference, and lots of other golfers have been asked about it subsequently and have kind of backed him up, really. And I think it will be a big point of discussion at Portrush over the next few days.
There was a lot of talk at Wimbledon. I'm not sure if you kind of picked up any of it, of the players who've talked about their mental health, and quite a few of them. I mean, obviously, Amanda Anisimova, who of course was double bageled in the final, had to take a year off to go and find the things that she enjoyed again in life a couple of years ago before she came back. And there were other players as well who've talked about their mental health. And actually, what I love about somebody, and it's probably, you'll say it's easy for him because he's so brilliant, Alcaraz, after he won the French Open, had his little trip to Ibiza, because he said it's really important for him to let his hair down after one of the big slams. And he does seem to take things lightly for a major champion. It doesn't seem to weigh heavy on him as it does for some people. He enjoyed that final in spite of losing it. You could tell he enjoyed being in that battle. And it is really important, isn't it, how, you treat the twin imposters, because you are going to lose as well as win.
And I think, look, there are lots of things that went on with Rory after Rory won the Masters and completed the Grand Slam there. But I do think one of those was, well, I've completed everything. I've fulfilled my dream, and I've won the Masters and I've done the Grand Slam. So what's next? And there's an element of what's next. There's an element of making sure you go and celebrate it, because you should celebrate it. And for a couple of months, I think he's been in a sort of little bit of a whirlwind, really, partly through other things going on in a relationship with the media that sort of went a bit downhill, particularly stateside. But there is how, as you say, how they deal, all these people, with victory and defeat takes a lot out of them. It does. It really does.
And on the Lions, we of course have a special episode which you can go back and listen to. We spent a day at Sale Sharks and chatted to Tom Curry, who gets his place in the starting lineup for the British and Irish Lions' first test against Australia. But it is as a Welsh woman, half Welsh heritage, it's a painful thing to say that first time since 1896 there is no Welshman in a Lions Test match squad against Australia, New Zealand, or South Africa. And obviously, the one player that everybody was hanging their hopes on was Jack Morgan, but unfortunately, he's not made the cut.
He's in probably the most competitive area of the squad, isn't he?
Yeah, he is, and also, and we are special on, which was his ascendancy. Henry Pollock has been incredible, and so perhaps not such a huge surprise he doesn't make the 23, but I reckon he would have been right there in the conversation until the very end, because he's had some great displays through the tour so far. His time, I'm sure, will come. He's 20 years old. I mean, it's not the end of his career. But yeah, it'll be interesting. That Australia squad, obviously, about a year ago, I think everybody expected it to be a complete whitewash, but they've obviously improved their form over the last year, beat England at Twickenham last autumn as well, but they are missing their first choice fly half, so after neck surgery. So, we'll see.
We will, and I'm sure we will have reaction to that on the Sports Agents next week. You can catch up with all of our episodes on YouTube, Global Player, or wherever you get your pods.
With pre-season matches all starting this weekend, Manchester United still have 5 big players in limbo, not part of their pre-season plans, but waiting to be sold. To figure out what's going on, we're going to chat with former Premier League footballer Nedum Onuoha and the Athletics Manchester United correspondent Laurie Whitwell next.
So let's delve more into the struggle then of Manchester United trying to sell players. I mean, there's also a struggle in trying to buy players, but let's deal with the selling players. Laurie Whitwell, United correspondent from The Athletic, and Nedum Onuoha are with us. They've got themselves, not for the first time, Laurie, in all of our discussions over the years, they've managed to get themselves in a right mess.
Yes, Sheffers, a sense of deja vu from conversations we've had previously on this topic. It feels actually perhaps even more accentuated than in the past, because you've got 5 players currently exiled from first team training, even as my colleague Mark Critchley reported this week, sort of told not to report to Carrington until 5 o'clock after Ruben Amorim and his first team squad have left. So they're obviously players that they are making the message clear to their futures lie elsewhere. And okay, maybe it's a practical decision on one level, but also I think it's very clear that they are saying to them, this is the future for you if you don't actively search for a new club. But that, I think, lessens their transfer value, and clubs can look at this and think, well, I could maybe wait and see how long this goes on for, and we'll put a lower bid in later in the window. But clearly United feel that the message being sent to the rest of the group and the kind of authority that Ruben Amorim has is more important at this stage than the kind of bottom line of what they can actually get in terms of transfer fees.
I guess, Nedum, as a player, it kind of depends how motivated you are individually to go find yourself a new club, whether you just want to take the wages that Manchester United are offering, whether you care at all about, kind of where your future trajectory lies, whether you think you can kind of lay low for 6 months and take the cash, or how much fitness you do. All of that is going to be down to the individual, isn't it? If the club has decided that you're outside of their remit now.
Yeah, I would agree. And to be honest, there's a lot more to this from every sort of individual's perspective. Because say, for example, when you do get that sort of like tap on the shoulder, text message, email saying you're going to be coming in at 5 o'clock, you're not really at peace with that. Because I think I've not really come across many players who don't believe that they should be able to train or play for a first team. Like the players we're talking about United here, they'll believe they're good enough to be starting. And as a consequence, when they're not doing so, you could argue there's some level of friction between themselves and the manager. That's one thing. To be on the bench is one thing. To be not in a squad is one thing. But to be told you have to train by yourself, that's a completely other thing. So now when you are doing it, because this happened to me in 2011, and from my side of things, this was at Man City under Roberto Mancini, and I'd been on loan at Sunderland the year before and enjoyed the year. It was a great year. We finished top 10. Sunderland did, seems like it's ancient history now, but that definitely happened. And just before the end of the season, I was told to go back to speak to Mancini and say that I want to be a part of the plans if this is what I want to do. So I did that. And I said, I want to try and fight for a place in the team for the next year. And then as I was getting ready for the season to start, I was at Centre Parks on a Saturday before training was supposed to start on the Monday. And I got a message saying, don't come in on the Monday, come in on the following Saturday. So initially, the young person in me is like, oh, incredible, more time off, best thing ever. And then I thought, hold on a second, let me send some messages out here. And I think it was Sean Wright Phillips I spoke to, maybe Michael Richards, and they said, no, they're training on Monday, but they were training Monday to Friday, then traveling to America on the Friday. And then myself, Craig Bellamy, Emmanuel Adebayor, Wayne Bridge, Roque Santa Cruz, and possibly a couple others, we're going to come in and start training on the following Saturday. There's no discussion about this because as I spoke with the manager at the end of the last season, the thought was I was going to come back in and try and see what could happen. No discussion. No, come in on Saturday. You figure out your situation. Now we're training with the under-18s. So now I'm in a position where, for me, this is my football club. You know, I'd been a supporter from a child. I'd been going to games at Main Road. You know, I was a ball boy. I'd come through the academy. Like, that was the only place I wanted to be. But in fairness, I was around other people who kind of wanted to be there, but they didn't have the same sort of like pull to remain there. So they're going to war with, not with the club, but with a manager who they believe is incredibly wrong and is putting them in a position which they don't feel they deserve. So from there, the conversations I'm having, some people saying, well, I'm just going to stay here, I'm going to take my money. Some people saying, this is wrong, I need to try and get in with the team. And some people are like just confused like myself, like, what? How did this happen? And I think that's the reality, because from a player perspective, and this is solely from a player perspective, the contract that you sign is one that the club gave to you, which they felt you was worthwhile and one which they believe they could afford. And all of a sudden, you're the bad guy for deciding to try and be paid the money which they gave to you. Except now you've got to make a decision to force yourself to leave, even though you believe you're good enough to stay. And that, when you mix it in with some of the other people's perceptions and perspectives, can make it a very, very tricky time for those people who are going to come in later in the day.
What activity were you doing at Centre Parks when you got that call?
I was actually in one of the cabins, and we were just about to start a barbecue. Obviously not inside the cabin, and then things just went west. But it was still, to be fair, I forgot a key part of the story. So we did that for the pre-season, and this was the pre-season where Balotelli does the back heel and so on. So it's like I pin it to that moment. And when they came back, I think the manager Mancini was still stunned that some of us were still there. It's like, well, I mean, what type of market do you think this is? So when we came back, we were training on one of the pitches with basically the under-18s, and they were training with the team. And what I hate is the fact that in that time now in my mind, I said, when our session was finished, I said, let me go and watch the first team. These were my peers and my former teammates. Yeah, let's go and watch the first team. So we went over to watch them, sat down on some balls watching. And after that session finished that evening, got another message to say, you can no longer train at the same time as the first team. You have to be in at 3:00, which is when everybody finishes.
Why? Why I never understand this on all sorts of different levels. You know, fines for a mobile phone going off, for example, is another. Why are football clubs so childish? What would you and those group of players done if you were still training? That meant you just actually couldn't have been around.
Added to that as well, chappers. It doesn't make economic sense.
No,
because you want
exactly.
your asset to be as physically fit and performing as well as you can to get maximum price for your asset. Yeah. What message does it send to the market that you don't even want those people mixing with the rest of your talent? That doesn't make any sense.
100%. Like, you get almost put in this sort of villain category, but one thing that comes from it is the messaging comes from the football club. So as a consequence, you never really have your say. And say from my side personally, I would never disrupt anything at City because that's the place that I wanted to be. You know, this is something that meant a lot to me through my life. And to be on that side of it, almost being perceived as a villain was, for me, it was heartbreaking. It was frustrating. And it's that sense of helplessness because there's nothing you can do about it. Whereas, I said this to Chappers the other day, when I was at City, there was a point where we had Patrick Vieira come there. And he told me a story about when he was at Inter, I believe, one time. Mourinho's manager, and Mourinho told him at the start of the season that he wasn't going to be part of his plans. And for Patrick Vieira, that's disappointing. But Mourinho said, I want you to train with the team. And if you do well and things go your way, maybe you'll have an involvement. So Patrick has a great pre-season and he's starting the first game of the season because he had the opportunity to train with the team. And I think sometimes, when you take out some players from a team, you're replacing them with young players who aren't necessarily ready to be training in that group anyway. If you tell a player that they want to leave, some of them might throw their toys out of the pram, but others try and prove a manager wrong, and in doing so they train at a higher level. So why not have that in and around the group as opposed to separate them and have this awkward position where all of a sudden this group of players who are fine are still friends with people who aren't fine anymore. You got to pretend that they don't exist.
And the point with some of these United players, Laurie, is some of them are disputing the club claiming that they all want to go. So if you had some of the ones who don't want to go still training and trying to prove themselves, one, as Nedum has said, you never know what might happen. Secondly, at least they look like they have a chance, and therefore their value holds more than, well, they're unwanted, as you said right at the start. We'll just go in with a really low offer on August the 30th and boom, we'll get them.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's ultimately, though, what shows Ruben Amorim's status at the club and how the hierarchy are trying to back him in a way, because he's the one that said, I don't want these players around the first team. It's clear, like Roberto Mancini will have done with Nedum and his colleagues. It comes from the manager, really. And okay, maybe there's ultimately, the club agree on certain players, certainly Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho. The club have made wider points on those previously. Alejandro Garnacho feels more of a case of Ruben Amorim's personal preference. Antony and Malacia was injured for a long period, and I think the club, there was some dispute over exactly how he was treated, and it took a long time for him to come back. So maybe that ship has sailed. And then Antony as well, previous manager, wanted him in. He's done well at Real Betis, so let's obviously just get him out. But it does feel that then, to Gabby's point, it reduces the value, but United will feel that means that there's a statement being made to the other players. And I suppose in a practical sense, if you've got players that perhaps do, are looking at their options and they might want to leave, having them around the group is certainly a difficult thing for a head coach to deal with when he's trying to, as he said, create the good times coming back, as he said at the end of last season. So it doesn't give that sense of freshness, that sense of evolution if they're sort of still there. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had this issue when you had a lot of players in a bloated squad at the end of his time around the place, and it kind of dragged the mood down a little bit. So I think that's what Amorim is guarded against. But certainly, to your original point, some players clearly are, they're all looking to depart, but they will dispute that they have actively said, I want to leave. So for Garnacho, for example, he wasn't looking to leave until he was told really by the club in January, you are available.
Maybe, Laurie, the mood is low because they keep going around sacking people rather than,
well,
how Tyrone Malacia behaves.
Yeah. And I'm intrigued, actually, on to Nedum's point, what does this do to the rest of the squad that are there still? That they're still friends with these guys to a degree. I know there's different relationships amongst all individuals, but, does it actually say to the players, you need to toe the line, you need to do what the manager wants and show absolute commitment? Or does it create this sense that, well, if they're able to do that to my teammate for several years on that front, could they do that to me in future?
So in terms of the individual and keeping your motivation going, Nedum, you've got different attitudes towards training from all of these guys. Some will love the fact that they've got to kind of go and do their gym work on their own. Others will be, having to get a trainer almost to force them into the gym. I noticed Marcus Rashford posting him in the gym, looking great, he looked like he was in a kind of, one of those pay-as-you-go gyms, didn't he? It looked like he was in some kind of public gym because there were people wandering behind him who definitely didn't look like they could play for Manchester United. And I guess, that is then also going to feed into how motivated you are to talk to other clubs. Are you literally able to just pick the phone up, or your agent pick the phone up and call whoever you want in this situation and put yourself out there?
I think everyone's in a slightly different situation, and to be completely honest and transparent, I think the options Marcus Rashford had will probably be different to the ones I had in 2011. With all due respect to myself, but in reality, it is tricky because as well, you can't just say you're going to go to this place, because from there you then enter the world of contracts and what the United want for you. You yourself, what are you willing to accept? Will the deal be able to happen, and how long is it going to take? Because for some as well, the moment you think you've got a way out of the situation that you're in, if the club then start making it a longer process and it's dragging out, that's when some of the frustration comes in. That's when you start to see like player action and so on. And again, that's a very tricky place to be in. And in regards to all this, I've got to say as well, when somebody tells you that they don't want you there, that's as clear as message as you could probably ask for. You don't need to say this 5 o'clock thing. And I think for those players coming in, I think anybody that's, existed around the M60 at any point in Manchester, that's not a good time to be heading over there. That will break you even, you know what I mean? That will break you just as much as getting there and seeing that there's nobody there anymore. You, as a footballer, you love playing, but it's not the individual side of things. It's the collective. It's being around your peers. It's playing 5-a-side, 6-a-side, 10-a-side, 11-a-side, playing in the arenas. So you're taking something very significant away from those players. And I personally don't think they need to do that. And I'm personally shocked that, this is something that's been going on for decades. But something like the PFA, the Players Union, aren't finding ways to make it so that it's harder for clubs to do it, because all of a sudden it happens every summer. But does it really need to if a player's been told they need to leave and a player decides that, they have to go as well?
Just going to play this voice note from friend of the pod, lawyer Daniel Geey. He's a partner at Sheridans, loads of experience negotiating high-profile football transfers. So he explains here the problems that United have.
There are always a number of factors to feed into the discussion around being able to sell players, and a lot of it can come from a few things. Number one is always leverage, which is how much effectively the player is earning and how long they have left on their contract. Alongside that is obviously how much a club wishes to receive by way of transfer fee as well. And that leverage then becomes twofold. One, the longer the player has left on their contract, sometimes that position might be that the club might have to pay the player a certain amount of their remaining contract in order as an incentive to leave the club. And in the same way, it might be that any potential purchasing club might not be able to afford the particular wages of that player if they are on significant sums. So those two factors usually come to the fore. Number one being the contract value and contract length. And then usually the second element is always the transfer fee. And it's always aligning those things between the buying club, selling club and the player that can lead to a number of difficult and interesting negotiations.
So bearing in mind what Daniel has said, Laurie, about length of contract, salary, so on and so forth, will Manchester United, do you think, be able to get any of these five cleanly off their books, i.e. a transfer fee and not having to pay them any more money to subsidise their salaries?
Well, that's the crucial thing, isn't it? So with Rashford and Sancho, they're big earners. I think they're on over £200,000 a week still, even with the Champions League cut. That obviously, United didn't qualify for the Champions League, so their wages stay as they were last season, which would have been an ironic twist if United had won that Europa League final. Their wages would have gone up to 25% or so. So I think certainly with Rashford, it looks to me likely that a loan will happen where a club will give a portion of his wages and United will still have to pay some of his wages. Now, if he was to go permanently, you feel that they would also still have to come to a kind of golden goodbye where they would pay him some kind of lump sum because I don't think any buying club would be able to pay the kind of wages plus the transfer fee that he's currently on at Manchester United. Now, Barcelona is clearly where he wants to go. Let's see if that develops. I think with Alejandro Garnacho, he's probably the likeliest to get a sort of decent transfer fee, combined with the fact that his wages aren't actually that high. When you look at Premier League averages, I think it's something like £50,000 a week because he signed his first pro deal a few years ago and it's running to 2028. So United are in a kind of comfortable position there, but his value certainly is taking a hit from what they perhaps were looking for in January or even last summer, when his numbers are still pretty decent. I think you look at what Antony Elanga's gone for to Newcastle, but I don't think United will be able to get anything like that for Garnacho because of this situation now that they're in. And maybe Garnacho, from his point of view, will think, well, I'll just wait it out because the lower the transfer fee, the potential higher the wages I'll be able to get, agent fees, for example, as well. So, I think a club such as Chelsea, clearly, they have shown interest in him. I think his intention is to stay in the Premier League with a Champions League club, even with their sort of quite restricted wage bill. They have a quite strict budget. I think they could still, accommodate that. So he's the one that I think might do okay. And obviously Antony and Real Betis, he had such a good loan spell there last season that you feel like they would want to try and make that a permanent deal.
I think I've got to say as well, so in regards to these situations, and we heard in the note there, leverage, a player will have more leverage if they have more years and more money on the table and so on. But this is when the messaging from the club and the outside messaging can really take effect, because people start calling players greedy for wanting to take the money which they're entitled for the contract which the club has given to them. And they'll say, oh, just take a pay cut. Just don't take this. Just don't take that. Well, maybe a player would be more likely to do it if they hadn't been told they have to train by themselves at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or evening for like weeks on end. Because then that's two groups of people, like the club and the player, trying to find a solution that works for both parties. But instead, there's a sense of resentment. There's nobody in that group at United or anywhere else. They'll be arriving at the training ground with a big smile on their face. They're like, oh, great. It's another great training day here today. I wonder what we're going to do. Because what you can do is going to be really limited anyway. So you thought the manager was wrong for not selecting you. you're thinking the manager's wrong for putting you in this group. You think the club are wrong for not supporting you. And now you feel really isolated. And when they say, well, if you want to leave, just let us take the money back.
And presumably, I know I seem like I'm a bit obsessed with gym work, but presumably there's a difference between being gym fit, Nedum, and then football fit, right? So if you're not, you might be able to kick a ball around with the 5 or 6 of you, but you're not doing the kind of intensity and the obsession that you would be doing if you were with the group. So again, that feeds into your value, doesn't it?
100%. And it's even, for example, a team that signs you probably needs to sign you earlier, so you've got enough time to hit the ground running when you get there to start the season. And this gym fit stuff, like, it's not a thing. Like, pre-season is such an important time. We speak about it every year for clubs, managers, the way they're going to build into the season, getting some of the tactical stuff there, the technical stuff, knocking off that rust and so on. When you're doing 3v3s over and over and over and over again, or worse still, you could bring more players across, but when those 5 players are training with United's under 23s, do you think that's making them any better? Or could they be better if they're playing against people who are of an international standard, who are amongst the group which they normally train with? So again, there's a lot of negatives about it, and I've yet to hear a positive, which I believe in, but maybe that's because I'm biased, because I'm a former player.
Are they, are Manchester United worse at buying or selling, Laurie?
That's a tricky one because, there's definitely been a long history of doing poor signings and also selling badly. I mean, even the sales that they're kind of making money on this summer without actually selling anybody. So Antony Elanga and Alvaro Carreras, who's gone to Real Madrid, they had sell-on clauses for those, 20% of the profit for Alvaro and 15% of the profit for Elanga. So they've made, over £10 million certainly on those deals, but they could have sold them better in the first place, right? Like, they sold Elanga.
Or they could have bought back Alvaro for €15 million, couldn't they?
Yeah,
and they spent
something like
double that on the left back that they did bring in January.
Yeah, Patrick Dorgu. I don't know exactly what that came down to. I think they felt like maybe he'd had his chance at United, Alvaro, so they decided to go for a player that was what they felt was had a potentially higher ceiling. So let's see how they both develop. But it is, I just thought letting him go in the first place was a curious one. He never got a first team opportunity and he'd done well for the 21. So yeah, it'd be really fascinating to see how he does at Real Madrid. But the Elanga one, for example, they bought Antony that summer for, 85 million pounds, and they got themselves into a corner because they'd left it so late. And now they're obviously in this position with Brian and Mbeumo and Brentford, where they're trying not to pay a few million more that Brentford are demanding. And that's why they've, I suppose, tried to make a stand here. But ultimately, they'll have to pay a hefty fee, really, for a player, who has done well. But equally, they're not finding hidden gems here, are they?
Honestly, Gabby, every time Laurie comes on, it's nothing against him, but I just end up wanting to hit my head against the wall.
It's a bit to do with me, isn't it, Chappers? Come on.
Even what you pay a little bit more for him. Bring him in. You need somebody to score goals. United scored 44 goals in the Premier League last season, lowest ever tally since '92. So in the Premier League era, that's the fewest they've scored. It would send out such a positive message, wouldn't it, Nedum, if they could just get that signing done, bring him in, and then that attracts maybe more interest from other players who are on the fringes of being courted.
Does it? I think.
Trying a positive spin here for Mark.
Yeah, sorry. Let's do the positive United spin
here. We need to
bring
him up here.
Nedum just wants to hit my head against the wall again.
Listen, I'll split it in two ways, yeah. So this project that United are currently undergoing, I think the selling point is that if you come there and you jump on this journey that leads to success, you will have so much joy at the end of it. You'll be spoken about for decades. You'll be so important for the history of this football club and arguably like the history of the Premier League as well. The downside is, as you arrive now, you're talking about a team that scored 44 goals in the league. And some of that isn't necessarily just down to finishing. It's probably the infrastructure. It's probably the way they try and build out the players and how they think about things on the field and the lack of sort of creativity that exists at the club. So this is probably the worst version potentially that you'll find for years to come. And maybe one coming across does make you wonder. But unfortunately, we've just named a bunch of signings who came over who could have inspired others, but instead they're training at 5 o'clock at Carrington by themselves on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So in reality, it's about judging, well, when is the right time? And you could probably make the argument it's probably not now, unfortunately.
Anything else, Gabby? I'm ready to.
Yeah, sorry, chappers. Sorry,
call it a
apologies.
day.
There just never seems to be a good news story, does there, coming out of Old Trafford, Carrington, or anything to do with Manchester United at the moment, and we can't bring you that today either. But thank you for your insight, Nedum. I'm sorry for taking you back to obviously what was a pretty miserable time for you, but I think you articulated it very, very well for those.
Listen, it took me a lot of years to learn how to articulate it very, very well, because previously it had a lot of swear words in it. But we move on. We move on.
Laurie, thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Okay, that's it for today. You can get in touch via email at thesportsagents@global.com or on our socials.
Catch up with all our episodes on YouTube, Global Player, or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to hit subscribe or follow and leave a review.
And our weekend edition will drop on Friday, so check that out. We'll talk about Usyk Dubois with Steve Bunce as they fight to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Thanks for listening.
The Sports Agents
with Gabby Logan and Mark Chapman.